Well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, you lovely folks. Joining us here for the league. That means nothing at all. Welcome back for some more top cut gameplay. I'm, of course, joined by Flesh and Blood's original Enigma. That's Shamir Sami over here on commentary with me. How are you today, my friend?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Scott?
Yeah, doing pretty good, thank you. Looking forward to getting stuck into some competitive, high-level gameplay for absolutely zero stakes with no importance whatsoever.
For the love of the
Tell me a little
game.
bit about what we're expecting to see in today's feature match.
Well, we've got one of the heroes that I probably most enjoyed out of Heavy Hitter season, most surprisingly to me, and not just one of them, but a double-double of them. We've got a Kassai mirror on our hands, which is a really interesting matchup to break down in terms of just the layers of strategy that happen between two players. And it'll be really interesting to see how our two competitors choose to navigate the matchup.
Absolutely. We've got two really big faces here. First, of course, the biggest name in Fab on YouTube, the lovely DM Armada. And of course, the second, Florin, Christian Locke, who is a fantastic Premier level player with a PT final and a calling win, couple more calling top eights. So if you've got to pick a horse in this race for zero prizes, who are you going with?
I mean, Florin is such an absurdly accomplished player, and I've seen him be so adaptable with the way that he plays. But then again, I'm never one to count out an underdog. So you know what? I'm gonna go with. I'm rooting for DM Armada here. I want my man to take it down.
As well, I would normally go with DM Armada in this case. We're good friends, lovely guy, but the commentary can't agree. That's illegal.
Oh
So,
yeah,
Florin
come on,
on
let's
my
have some
side.
rivalry.
Let's have some fun. Let's have some friendly banter with it. So, looking forward to seeing how these two players manage to break down this game and what it is they'll care about. And with that, let's head on down into the game.
Fish around for these things.
Oh.
Want to roll two
Lovely
dice?
pre-game banter here between these players. Just looking to get a die roll sorted.
I got an 8 as well. Look at that.
8 into 8. So we're going to have a little bit of a re-roll to see who's getting to choose to go first here. Some equipment set up nice and early here. Some very subtle differences. A hot streak on the side of DM Armada.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hot Streak in general for Kassai. Just on the grounds, I think it gives you a lot more versatility into a wide range of matchups. But in truth, considering neither of these players are probably playing a high density of attack action cards, they're probably both just 1 for 2 weapons with no other text for the most part. Interestingly, we see them both equipping the Crown of Dominion, which I think is one of the more aggressive headpieces for Kassai to be equipping, as opposed to something like Balance of Justice or the Crown of Providence, which has kind of been entrenched in the meta for a very long time. So maybe that suggests that these two are both really looking to just butt heads and, well, see who comes out on top.
Yeah, really big fan of that Crown of Dominion in these lists at the moment. Just giving you flexibility from everything from raise an army to cash in. Looks like we're starting much as we expected here. DM Armada going first in this case. Hot streak into Blade Runner. Get used to this one. Going to be seeing plenty of this on both sides of the table, quite literally in this case. Giving that bonus to the next weapon swing and granting a go again. Centauri Saber, the follow-up. Looks like we're coming in for 5.
The absolute cookie cutter turn. There is nothing like a Blade Runner to enable all of these powerful turns that Kassai can pull off. And of course, we'd be remiss not to mention the power of Valiant Dynamo, which is possibly one of the most impactful equipments in any Kassai matchup, but this one especially.
Plenty going on here on this first turn of the game. Looking to earn blocks from some really powerful cards. Blood on her hands, raise an army, and looking to punk some damage with an Iron Song response. Blunted by a sink below, held by Florin.
Always has it.
No damage going through. Very, very clever card assessment by both players in that case. Trying to get the most out of everything from their opening hands. Over to Florin we go. It's Centauri Saber coming in for 2. Full grip of cards, plenty of attack reactions. We have what looks to be an Iron Song response being pitched there as well. Interesting inclusion from both players here.
I think Iron Song is a really powerful card for these more aggressive-leaning Kassai lists, which have started to emerge in the latter half of the Heavy Hitters metagame. Interestingly, I think from Florin's side, that's a yellow copy, which is pretty unusual. I think the red commonly sees play, but yellow Iron Song, that's pretty spicy.
Looking for more ways to punish people on that first Centauri swing in a lot of cases. Take it on the chin here. Coming on down to suck up this damage from the first Saber. But we will be having a second attack coming after this. Agility token here, really big deal for DM Armada. Means both those swords are going to be swinging regardless of the contents of their hand.
Yeah, Take It on the Chin is an incredibly impactful card in this matchup, not least because it acts as instant speed prevention to play around some reactions from the opposing side, and also because the upside of that agility is just massive in the matchup.
Interesting. Is this a Blood on her hands here being used to block. Both these players very willing to give up copies of that card early. Do we think it's particularly important in this matchup overall, or is it just mostly going to be a yellow you choose to block with?
Well, Blood on her hands is perhaps one of the biggest finishers, or kind of end games, as I like to call them, for Kassai. So while it might be a little surprising to see them blocked with them in this way, we've got to remember that to actually pull them off, you need at least some number of copper tokens, which neither player has at the moment. Really, we're looking at least 4 copper to pull off a respectable Blood on our hands turn. And right now, there's no point in holding onto cards just hoping for the future when you've got to play the game that's in front of you.
These players with the aggressively slanted loadouts definitely means they have a reason to believe they might not get to those end game stages of the game. However, Outland Skirmish, definitely something that we are going to be seeing on this agility turn here, bolstering this first Saber, threatening some of those all-important pieces of copper.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is building towards those end games, and I think this is part of why I've grown to love Kassai so much, actually, is because a lot of the time your game boils down to you're building towards this handful of end games that is so powerful. And it reminds me a lot of the Icelander mirror in that way, which is one of my favorite mirrors of all time in Flesh and Blood. It's about how do you choose to build to your end games? How does your opponent recognize that and choose to counterplay them?
Yeah, I'll block with the chest.
A lot of sense. Hot Streak here coming in as the follow-up, earning some armor block here from not Courage of Blade Hold, wrong one, Grains of Blood Spill, in this case being used to block the chest. I think this is really heads up by Florin. It just goes to show you how important those copper really are in this matchup as the game goes along. The armor pieces being saved and used to deny their creation.
Yeah, Florin choosing to hold a hand of this many cards is particularly interesting as well. It suggests that maybe he's got something of a power turn lined up. We're activating the Kassai ability, which is threatening the creation of an extra gold token, which could mean a myriad number of end games. So I think this is going to be a turn that DM really cares about.
A lot of things to think about here. Vigor token being popped at the start of the turn means that we don't even need to necessarily pitch one of these cards to facilitate playing the other. Lots of moving pieces for DM Armada to consider here. If you're on DM's side, what kind of cards are you hoping to block with in a spot like this? Is there a hand big enough to make you not respect this first Saber?
I think, well, as I kind of say about, you've got to think about what endgame you're choosing to prioritize, because Kassai has this handful of them, at least a lot of Kassai lists that I've encountered have this handful between copper generation combined with blood on our hands, gold generation combined with the likes of Cash-In and Raisin Army, and let's not forget the attack action powerhouse that is Nourishing Emptiness. You kind of can't block it all. So you kind of need to make some decisions about what it is that you're really going to choose to care about. And in this case, I think we've prioritized stopping the gold here. But Florin has one of the most impactful attack reactions from heavy hitters in Blade Flurry.
No denial in this case. Brave Forge Brace is getting in the way, not enough to stop a 4-powered Saber coming over the top, courtesy of that Blade Flurry. Most pressing part of this, however, Blade Flurry going to operate on both attacks this turn, alongside that Blade Runner, and maybe even Brave Forge Braces. This second Sword Swing is going to be massive.
Yeah, it looks like we might be looking at an attack for 7 by my count if we activate the Bracers, which is pretty significant damage for this stage of the game. What's really interesting is we've seen neither of these players be very willing to block with their Valiant Dynamos so far. Maybe that's just kind of playing around the potential of what if I don't get 2 sword swings. It's really interesting to see a card that's normally so impactful be kind of sit on the sidelines at the beginning of the game like this.
Curious indeed. Both players being very heads up with those Dynamos. They are possibly the most valuable card in the matchup overall, so making sure that you get full value out of them and don't get them stuck, unable to refresh for several turns, definitely a big priority on both sides. Really pressing situation here, of course, for DM Armada. Thankfully, the gold trigger has been resolved, so we are just looking at some vanilla damage here. With 35 life, there's definitely a lot to think about as to whether you want to block now, save breathing room for later, or use that life total as a resource.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's most important to kind of reflect on as you play the Kassai Mirror is think about, what's the quality of my hand now versus the qualities of hands that I could draw in the next 2, 3, 4, even 5 turns. And is it worth it for me to spend precious life points to deploy the hand that I have here, or to wait for a more important kind of endgame building hand? And it looks like DM has decided, you know what, this one is not as important to me.
No.
Red reactions there. In the swing, not necessarily a card you can get full value out of on a low number of cards in hand. She's going to block there, preserve that life for a little bit later on, take a point over the top, going to 34 here. We're back to DM Armada here. 2 cards in hand, I believe, and a Arsenal to work with. No need for the Arsenal, though. It's time to nourish our emptiness.
This is what you normally really want to save armor for in the matchup. The fact that Florin has been caught without a defense reaction at this point in the match could be really, really significant. It could suggest that DM is going to walk away from this turn with 5 intellect and 6 cards between his hand and arsenal going into the next turn.
But he can argue that DM Armada is not a big-brained individual, and an extra point of intellect would certainly go a long way to proving that. Looks like we are not caught without a defense reaction here. Sink Below in hand, partnering up with those Valiant Dynamo, and of course an extra bit of armor from Braveforge Braces to make sure that powerful on-hit isn't going through.
Indeed, Dynamo's deployed for the first time here, so it looks like and we return with the No You card, the good old Uno reverse card in Nourishing Emptiness right back.
We've had first Nourishing Emptiness, but what about second Nourishing Emptiness? Florin here looking to become the big-brained individual themselves, and repeat kind of what we just said about DM's turn as well. Extra card lurking in hand here, so it would be 6 cards total to work with next turn. That's Lexi numbers. That's real scary stuff if we're able to put that together. And DM Armada here found in the same bind as Florin was just moments ago.
Absolutely. I think DM has the slight advantage here that he's got his Grains of Bloodspill completely intact at the moment, meaning a 3 block from hand plus Dynamo plus the Grains would represent 6 block to prevent this Nourishing on hit. But let's see what he's got prepared.
Dynamos are lining up. We can expect to see this plenty over the course of this matchup, given the nature of this armor piece, but lots of other decision trees to be made here as to whether we care more about turning off Nourishing Emptiness or preventing our opponent from scoring those points of copper, those gold along the course of the game. As a fairly experienced Kassai, Shamir, which do you think is more important if people are getting into the hero for the first time? Is Nourishing Emptiness the thing you should be focusing your armor on, or is that copper or gold a bit more pressing?
Well, the thing about, I tend to think about Nourishing Emptiness and Copper as being on the same level, as they provide a lot of early tempo, or at least they can provide an endgame that very swiftly has an impact on the game. And speaking of which, it looks like DM Armada is about to present one such setup turn like that himself with the Spoils of War. Nourishing achieves something very similar, but the gold production on, say, the Kassai activation is quite a different beast and plays over a much longer game.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Spoils of War, a card that is kind of notorious at this point. One of those warrior mainstays that sees play in every version of the class. In Kassai, definitely carrying a little more weight, however. Not only go again on the first sword swing, but threatening to make those all-important coppers over the course of the entire turn. This is one that you normally have to respect unless your hand is particularly impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, we have seen a couple of or at least we've definitely seen one Blood on Our Hands hit the graveyard from DM Armada's side, but that means there's 2 still lurking in deck potentially, and 4 copper on a Blood on Our Hands represents a 2-card 10 damage play, which in the Warrior Mirror is truly impressive numbers.
Oh, that's good.
Indeed, and once again, earning block here. Love to see this. Very, very
Me neither.
composed, I'm going to say, from Florin here. It's hard to give up Grains of Bloodspill so early into the game and accept you'll no longer have access to its ability, but denying this copper is just that important. We're cashing in the armor piece to make sure nothing is coming from DM Armada. Unfortunately, take it on the chin is not going to prevent the copper. It's in the swing to punch through some damage and make sure we score some money.
Yeah, one of those Everfest classics that just really turned on this whole dual-wield warrior archetype alongside Blade Runner. In the swing, just being a conditional, but let's face it, for these kinds of warriors, almost unconditional 0 for 3 reaction was a really big power pump for the warrior class.
Delegated there by DM Armada to make sure those copper tokens are coming into effect. Agility is going to pop for Florin, however, courtesy of Take It on the Chin, meaning we're seeing at least 2 Centauri Sabers this turn, maybe a little bit more. Couple of cards to work with, whole lot of options here.
Absolutely. It's really, I mean, I absolutely agree with Florin's decision to let go of the Grains of Bloodspill there. It is so essential to stop copper generation, but I get the feeling it's happened early enough that he is really going to feel the loss of potential value from being able to create those Vigor tokens. Because for a lot of Kassai decks, it can actually really smooth out the cost curve when sometimes you're forced to pitch yellows, and that one Vigor token just smooths you over nicely.
And they can
Yeah.
do. Speaking of nice, Slice and Dice in this particular case, coming down to join this first Centauri Saber, another one of those Everfest All Stars. That set is aged exceptionally well in the case of two-handed warriors, and honestly, a lot of other heroes as well. Pushing a lot of extra damage here over the course of 2 weapon attacks, definitely rewarding you for this style of gameplay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that Warriors got access to a 0-for-4 kind of value on a single card was groundbreaking at the time of Everfest release. If only we'd known that just a few sets later we had Blade Flurry. I doubt we could have predicted that one.
Want to put together for sure. Lots of damage being pushed here. 5 coming in for Florin. We did indeed take the first swing on the chin yet again, making an agility on the way back for DM Armada. 1 card block on this second swing, leaking a little bit of damage to try and keep a 3-card hand here with that agility. If you're in Florin's situation here, opponent choosing to take some damage with 3 cards and an agility, is Blade Runner still a concern, or are we expecting some other style of combat trim?
We're definitely expecting something else in here, and it looks like that something else is some card draw courtesy of Cash In, which is going to do 2 quintessential things. First of all, I hear drawing 2 cards in Flesh and Blood is quite good. But secondly, it's also going to trigger Kassai's first ability, which means that her sword swings are now free throughout this turn. Combined with that agility token, that means there's 4 damage and 4 cards still in hand. And he doesn't have to pay for any of it at the moment. So everything in hand is just reactions, attack actions, could be all kinds of tricks back there.
Cash In was absolutely huge here. 2 cards drawn, first ability of Kassai activated, and curiously the second ability of Kassai activated, courtesy of that second yellow as well. This is a cluster of cards in DM Armada's hand here. Swords cost nothing to swing, full grip to work with, and gold being threatened. What are you supposed to do here?
I mean, I think in Florin's position, it's for me, I consider it a bit of a losing battle to try and stop all the gold output. You kind of have to prioritize what are the end games I can stop, because if I try and stop all of them, I'm just going to bleed cards, bleed value, and lose tempo, which I think, despite being behind on life, DM Armada is flooded with tempo right now, which is incredible. I suspect he's going to choose to take some of the damage on this turn and see just how much DM can present, but let's see it. At the end of the day, it really depends on the quality of Florin's hand.
Definitely quite the bind to be in here. Many things being threatened. Who knows how big this turn could go, or whether that gold token is the most important thing. No blocks being declared on this first sword swing, and it's a Blade Flurry to start. This super impactful Majestic once again showing its chops. For a first sword swing, now worth at least 4. That bonus going to extend onto the hot streak as well.
Absolutely. I've got to say, one thing I really admire about DM Armada's play in this game so far is he has been so judicious at kind of distributing on hits. Because one thing that you don't want to do too much as Kassai is concentrate all your on hits into one turn, like playing a Spoils of War and activating Kassai and this, that, the other. Because by doing so, you just give your opponent an opportunity to block out this turn, and you lose a ton of permanent resources in doing so. Power cards, cards in graveyard as fuel for Kassai's ability. Instead, he's chosen to distribute these really effectively. And now, by activating Kassai here, I believe he has banished that Nourishing Emptiness from his graveyard, which means the next one is online and ready to go.
Exceptionally well navigated here by DM Armada. Knows how to incentivize opponents to block, but not get punished when they choose to, which is a very, very difficult skill set to learn, and love to see it on display here. 4 block coming in on this hot streak attack, courtesy of the Valiant Dynamo, bound to be refreshed. It looks like no extra juice coming over the top here, which is a little bit concerning. That cash in perhaps not getting full value, not finding the cards that DM was hoping to find.
I think Florin's got to make a read here on what those last 2 cards are. My suspicion would be some kind of defensive card, like more copies of Take It on the Chin or defense reactions like Sink Below. But it's really up to Florin to see, how is he going to choose to read that hand, and the fact that there were no reactions on that second swing.
DM has been through a good number of those Take It on the Chins, but don't think we've seen any Sink Below or even Fate Foreseen or similar style effects from them yet, so good chance there's one lurking around in the very near future. It's Outland Skirmish coming in for 5 here alongside this Centauri Saber. These play patterns pretty bread and butter for Kassai, once again threatening to make that incidental copper as these sword swings come in and make those endgame turns significantly more pressing.
Absolutely. I think the priority for both players at this point, I think, certainly if I was playing this game, I'd be looking to assemble one of those really big power turns where you can combine something like a Spoils of War with a Blade Flurry, or Spoils of War with some kind of other attack reaction that's really going to push your damage through, like an Iron Song response and in the swing, because these on-hits are what make and break the game, I think. You can certainly grind it down to just, play efficient 2-card hands, but you put yourself a little bit at the mercy of draw variance, and I think you never get quite the same value that you do when you assemble these massive end games.
We see once again here, DM Armada taking a similar approach, realizing this copper is likely to be what's important as the game continues, and giving up that all-important piece of armor in Brave Forge Bracers to blunt that first hit. Unfortunately, it's a Blade Runner that's coming in on the second one. 5 points of damage coming through, but no copper scored. That's the most important part here.
I think the copper is still scored, because the neat thing about Land Skirmish is it applies across the entire turn, which is makes it a really difficult one to block out.
You're all good. I hadn't noticed Florin pick up their custom token on the side there.
That's a lovely piece of copper. What drip.
Totally missed it on my part. So yes, drip. Copper coming through on that second swing. Blade Runner perhaps catching DM Armada out a little bit there for using their armor to try and blunt that first shot.
I mean, playing two pretty high-quality reds at the same turn that way, I don't know if that was a full-on power turn, but I will say it was pretty impressive. We were looking at, roughly 12 value over the course of that turn, 11 value, entirely ignoring the generation of the copper, which has kind of a nebulous amount of value, but certainly is worth something as these endgames start emerging.
Play yellow slice and dice.
Once again, cash in this premium card choice for DM Armada in this case. Not exactly stock in these Kassai lists anymore. Really cool to see it being used here to not only facilitate much bigger power turns, but also keep activating Kassai's ability turn after turn here. Once again, cards being banished to threaten that gold generation here on DM's side.
Absolutely. I think DM's deck list from what we've seen so far is definitely the I'm going to just throw swords at you and we're going to see how much you can take, which is working, I think, in his favor at this point. Again, despite being behind on life, I think he's navigating the game quite brilliantly so far, and he's slightly ahead on endgames. So let's hope that carries through for him.
So the sword swing here coming in for 3. Love to see it at the beginning of this. Florin with it. Reason to respect this. Again, these gold and copper tokens, they are worth, their weight in gold. I'm going to say it.
It's too free.
And therefore having to think about exactly what is worth covering up in this spot. Iron Song Response, a card that can definitely have some very powerful moments in this matchup, but being choose to play defense here, as most Welcome to Wraith cards do, blocks 3 on defense.
Absolutely. I think that's really the strength of Kassai at the end of the day. The fact that your hand can just basically do whatever you need it to do. And these builds that have developed towards the end of the Heavy Hitters metagame have this modality where if they get left with a bunch of tempo, they go, oh, neat, I've got a ton of red reactions in my hand. I'm going to throw so much damage at you. And if they're under pressure and need to start blocking, they go, oh, look, all my cards block 3, and I have free block on my dynamos, and my fridge is huge. I'll stop whatever you're doing and just do a nice 2-card hand.
Very flexible deck that rewards you for understanding the dynamics of the matchup that you're playing and using your cards to gain those minuscule edges that other players might miss. And that's exactly what we're seeing here from both of these players. Careful consideration about whether their attack reactions are better on offense or defense. And the answer appears to be either, depending on the situation we find ourselves in over the course of this game.
Absolutely. Armada still with 3 cards in hand on the second swing coming in for 6. I would be a little bit terrified in Florin's position here. I wonder what the punish is.
Definitely an awful lot of options here for DM Armada. It's kind of the power that cash-in brings in a deck like this. It says you've got to present a full normal Kassai turn and still have a full grip to threaten these in the swings, additional Blade Runners, maybe even attacking with an attack action after this if Blade Runner is giving Hot Streak go again.
Oh, I smell the second copy of Nourishing Emptiness around the corner at this rate, which I think might well put Florin well on the back foot.
This is very much something you're hoping not to see if you're in Florin's position. Gave up, take it on the chin to be able to keep a hand that could potentially push back some kind of damage, and instead maybe facing the panic mode of an upcoming Nourishing Emptiness. Does choose to sink below on this attack regardless, soak up the rest of that damage from the Hot Streak. No gold token being made from Kassai. There's no nourishing happening. We are instead conquering an army instead. threatening that arsenal that Florin might have needed to put a turn together.
And is Florin just left with one card in hand at this point? That blocking out that CNC is looking like a very tall order indeed, which is going to mean that Florin is at risk of losing his arsenal here and being down to just a single card on his turn. This could very well be the turn that swings the tempo and life totals back around in DM Armada's favor.
4, 5.
Absolutely huge tempo swing from DM Armada here. Florin taking a moment to ask a curious question about whether or not any of the damage prevention from taking on the chin was still floating there. But sadly, I believe that's not how that one works. If it prevents any amount, it's all gone.
Unfortunately, yeah, it will prevent
Can't break it
up to 2 damage of the next instance of damage. Unlike these kind of ongoing prevention effects, as we call them, from things like Crown of Seeds and Hold the Line. Indeed, Take It on the Chin provides a discrete prevention effect, which means that CNC is coming in for full brunt of 6 damage.
We are taking it all in this case. Arsenal spoils of war buying the dust in this case. That's a huge hit on behalf of DM Armada and a huge blow to the plans of Florin.
It does look like Florin might have been waiting for one of those turns where he can assemble that with some attack reactions and really force the copper through. But wow, Command and Conquer being an absolutely brutal punish in this situation.
Okay, to crack 1 gold.
Doing our best on the way back with what we have. Really interesting choice here, choosing to pitch our run through in order to crack a gold. And the reason to do that is exactly what we're seeing here. Agility token means both these swords have the potential to swing anyway. And if we draw any kind of buff, we're able to make this turn much bigger than it would be if we were just attacking with 2 Centauri Sabers.
Well, this is the beautiful thing about the gold generation in Kassai. It doesn't seem like much in the moment. You just go, it's a gold. Gold's never been useful before in the format. But in combination with her first ability, you end up in the situation where you can activate a gold, draw a card, and then swing your sword for free anyway. So those 2 resources were still effectively being used to swing the swords, but also drew a card for the trouble. It's like being on 5 intellect for a turn. Absurdly powerful plays happening here.
Huge play from Florin. And really heads up, honestly. I feel that's the kind of micro decision that players who are brand new to Kassai might not manage to put together themselves without the fun and pleasure of cracking some gold tokens for the first time. Heavily rewarded for taking the risk in this case. And you love to see it.
Indeed. At worst, it often represents, I'm going to have a card that I can place in my arsenal, which is fantastic. And it means, actually, it informs a lot of Kassai's card choices in deck building because she wants cards that she can blindly draw for gold and at the very worst end up effectively in arsenal.
Love to see it here. It looks like we are pulling on back over here.
Sounds better to me.
Yeah, it does.
Hit and run coming on down for DM Armada, giving that first attack go again, not taking the chance that there's an attack in the hand, but there likely isn't on the other side to make sure this hot streak has go again coming in first. Really interesting choices over the course of this game, actually. DM Armada choosing to occasionally sequence the hot streak first and occasionally sequence the Centauri Saber first, depending on whether Go Again is already active. In this case, no risks being taken, wanting that Saber to come in second.
I think it's a situation where in this matchup, again, you kind of look at them both as just being 2 attack weapons without much text on them. But certainly in other matchups, the sequencing of whether you swing a hot streak first or a saber first can do so much in terms of your ability to play out the turn. I think my favorite kind of juke play is when I swing a saber first, give it Go Again with a Blade Runner, swing my hot streak, and they think, oh, the turn's over, because that's all the Kassai does. They block with an attack action, boom, surprise nourishing.
You love to see it on the end of several of those bigger turns if you manage to put that together. And as much as it's not commonplace in this matchup for the choice to matter, there are attack actions in both of these decks, and it's just good habits to build to make sure you're swinging in the right order in situations where it might matter in corner cases in a matchup like the Kassai Mirror. Once again, gold being cracked here for Florin to enable those swords to swing for free. Looks like we're going to have another turn of various combat tree.
There's a subtle, but I think very important piece of information to pick up on here, which is that Florin has pitched a Raisin army, which would be an alternative outlet for his gold in order to crack it. And this kind of suggests, this is how you can start to read your Kassai opponent and figure out what endgames are they prioritizing. By choosing to send a Raisin army to the bottom of the deck and destroy some of the fuel that would make it effective later on, Florin is saying, I don't want to play for a long Raisin army game. I want to play for a short game. I want to, play for tempo and acquire card advantage, not think about building this massive board of allies that'll kill you eventually. I want to kill you now.
Yeah, really heads-up decision from both players, honestly. DM Armada representing the same kind of thought process. Gold not being preserved. We're happy to cash it in for those copies of cash-in to try and score some bigger power turns now. We want payment up front. This game isn't going to be going long in a lot of spots, so we'd much rather use our gold aggressively than defensively.
I think it's one of the most beautiful things about this mirror is that you could absolutely face an opponent who decides, you know what, given the board state right now or the way that my deck compares to my opponent's, Raisin Army is my endgame. And you see a totally different game. You see one which blocks so much more conservative, where gold generation is prioritized so much higher over copper generation and nourishing on hits. It's a really, really fascinating way to look at the mirror.
Seems like a exciting matchup, very liquid and possibly just very skill rewarding. We see a Kassai here, activation from Florin in this case, and this might be his second one of this game. A bit less aggressive with it than DM over the course of the game. Coming in for 5 in this case, representing a gold on hit.
One of the interesting things to kind of remember and consider with Kassai activations is they're usually kind of limited by the cards of a certain color in your graveyard, most often yellows, because we don't prefer to play yellows as opposed to reds, which get better rate usually. So if you want to ensure that things like your Nourishing Emptinesses are consistently enabled, you have to ensure that you have enough yellows in the graveyard so that when the next Nourishing hits, you can banish it away, so that when you draw the one after that, it's ready to go.
I'm not sure.
There's this kind of pacing to think
firmly in the swing. Firmly in the swing.
We are firmly in the swing. The good old warrior endgame of, oopsie, you took way more damage than you thought you were going to this turn. Nothing like it.
You would like to not block and take 11? Don't mind if I do. That's an awful lot of damage coming here from Florin. These life totals, they've been kind of in Florin's favor over the course of this game, but they were getting close. They were getting very marginal, small points of value everywhere. There's now a gargantuan deficit, a lot less breathing room for DM Armada to work with. I hope those 4 cards are worth it.
It's really interesting that he decided to keep 4 cards here in the face of a Saber for 5. It's suggesting that the hand is good. So let's see what DM's got lined up.
Hopefully the volley back is of equal pedigree to kind of close that gap back up in the face of such a devastating turn from Florin here. DM taking their time to consider, maybe knocked a little senseless from such a gigantic swing. No, there is blood on DM's hands this time round. We're cashing in those 2 copper we have. What modes do we think we're selecting here?
Most often we are looking at kind of one source of go again and one source of attack twice. But here we're actually seeing a blood on our hands for just a single copper token. And I'd be very surprised if we saw anything but the go again mode chosen there. It's a very kind of conservative line of play, not thinking about endgames as much as thinking about kind of these functional hands. I do wonder what the plan is here with these 3 extra cards in hand. It's going to be really fascinating to see what DM's lined up.
Curious choice. Perhaps DM in a situation where there's just no other natural go again in their hand of cards and forced to kind of use blood on our hands to facilitate a power turn with the rest of their incredible cards. Or maybe they know something we don't and they're trying to keep information hidden for as long as possible. Conservative blood on our hands turns, not a common sight, but they look like they could be quite impressive here. We're starting slice and dice into Hot Streak here, threatening gold and threatening damage.
Yeah, there's something interesting happening here for sure. I think it's kind of suggesting to me that there's not another go-again source in hand besides that blue Precision Press, which was not going to be funded by another blue, which means that last card in hand is neither a blue nor a go-again enabler. I wonder what it could be.
I think it's some of the things that jump to mind, maybe copies of Stroke of Foresight.
Stroke of Foresight. What a beautiful card in this matchup.
It's a lovely, lovely buff. One that's definitely seen plenty of play, but definitely seeing more play since Dromai chose to leave the format. Really good, again, punishing people for not respecting that first sword swing. A lot of people know if they're choosing to soak up damage, they're much better off blocking swing number 2 to play around in the swing. Try and make sure they're not taking too much there. And these kind of attack reactions from yesteryear, the ones from Welcome to Wraith, that are really good at triggering reprise and punishing people for not respecting that first swing. Definitely very heads up. And a great hit for making these swords free.
Exactly. That reprise is so relevant here because in the event that you get it, it basically turns this card into an extra copy of Ironsong Response. And I think having 6 red Ironsong Responses might be kind of good.
That's why I like.
Yeah, definitely love the idea of being able to push extra damage on those first sword swings of the turn. And Florin definitely kind of considering what's going on here. Perhaps a defense reaction in hand to try and mitigate this gold, depending on what we see here. I'm wondering what they're thinking about.
Yeah, it's a tough position because you also know that the second sword is going to be coming in for 5. So it's not really like you get a lot of value out of preventing a ton of damage here. I think Florin has opted to take the 3 there. And if he has a D-React handy, then we might be looking at it played on this swing for 5 instead.
You already got the gold.
get the extra point of value from that D-React, which is very heads up if you think you're going to be leaking the gold token either which way. Pretty impressive turn here, honestly, for DM Armada. We were a little skeptical, should I say, when Go Again was opted for as the only mode on that Blood on Our Hands, but 11 damage and a gold token being represented is not a bad turnaround for a hand that was quite awkward fundamentally.
Well, once again, it's just the modality of these Kassai cards coming out to play. I've got to say, that's one of the things that I'm so impressed by when you look at the way that she plays. And it's one of the things that made me love her so much. It reminded me so much of Icelander.
Number 3, huh?
Yeah, so I'll take 2.
Okay, Take It on the Chin looks to be the defensive card of choice for Florin here. So not blocking out this sword swing entirely, but generating that all-important agility token to enable some kind of big turn back. We don't need a lot here. The Armada is down on 10. These turns from Florin are going to be significantly more threatening at this point.
Absolutely. We're going to start to approach the much more typical Warrior endgame of one reaction could spell your doom. So how would you like to play around them? And usually the answer is D-React or bust, because any other way of trying to play around an attack reaction in a Warrior is probably going to put you under in terms of implied value.
Absolutely. So most common start I think we'll see here a lot moving forward. Just Centauri Saber for 2. Hold the information for as long as we possibly can. Does it have Go Again? Well, in this case, yes, but it might not in the future. Do we have a buff for the first swing, a buff for the second swing? The more we can keep hidden as long as possible, the more likely we are to catch DM Armada out and end this game quickly.
Absolutely.
Cool. I take 2.
So 2 damage being taken here on this first Saber. No immediate punish, but the same kind of threat persists here. Second Saber swing coming in for 2. Is it just 2? Is it 5?
It looks like it's 3 thanks for an activation of the Braid 4 Bracers, but let's see what the last card looking in hand is. I get the feeling that it's a card that Florin is not eager to play this turn, because I think, based on the way he's been cracking gold this game, if it was a card that he knew he wanted to play this turn, the upside of cracking gold and kind of generating that pseudo-card advantage, that extra intellect, would be really, really high.
It's an incredible observation and very heads up from you to spot. Florin here, I think maybe eager to keep the card, if not playing it. So perhaps a defense reaction to blunt the assault on the way back. Perhaps another really important card for the follow-up turn, something like a Spoils of War that might help make sure that next turn is going to be fully operational regardless of the 4 cards drawn. Definitely a bind DM Armada finds themselves in here, trying to soak up some damage and keep the pressure on.
No goods today.
Absolutely. It's looking like, well, we actually have yet to see Florin resolve one of these really big, powerful turns a la kind of Spoils of War. So, I mean, they've got to be lurking soon. We had one destroyed by a Command Invoker, but that means there are 2 still lurking in the deck, aren't there?
Absolutely, they've got to be somewhere, and in DM's case, they're
Looks
here.
Looks like
right
DM's
now,
found them right here.
Spoils of War coming down to start this turn again. Really threatening card here. Florin at 19 does have some life to work with if he wants to take an assault to try and end the game, but the cost of doing so will be numerous copper tokens that might fuel a big Blood on Our Hands that could maybe get DM Armada back in. Really interesting pivot point here to decide how much of this damage you want to respect.
It's going to be really interesting to see Florin's decision, because I think so much of it is dependent on how long you think this game is going. I believe we've seen the last Blood on Our Hands in DM Armada's deck pitched earlier in the game, which means it is sitting in the pitch stack waiting for him. If Florin thinks that he can close this game before we reach that point in the pitch stack, then this copper on hit is basically blank.
Have a little think.
Absolutely. Real pivotal moment here for Florin, and will mostly come down to his ability to assess this game. And when you've got someone of that kind of caliber, I'm sure he's going to be fantastic at doing so. Will we get back to that last Blood on Our Hands, or will this game be long over before then? That is the pivotal question at this point.
Yeah, this is when the mirror starts to feel less like just kind of a slugfest of throwing cards at each other, and much more kind of considered, thinking about, what's the end game? What are they playing towards? How can they win this game, and how can I stop them from reaching that position?
Tons of moving pieces. Definitely a matchup I'm interested in exploring more in the future. If you enjoy micro decisions, maybe you should too. DM here, presenting that all-important swing with that Centauri Saber, coming in for 4. Florin deciding how much to respect. And I don't blame him for taking his time here. This is a very important pivot turn. There's a lot to consider. And it's important to slow yourself down, think those moments through.
Absolutely. I think the fact that DM chooses to hold a card on this turn as well, there is so much hidden information lying there. Could it be yet another copy of Blade Flurry? Could it be another copy of Stroke of Foresight, an Iron Song response, and then the swing? I mean, it's almost impossible to know what to play around. You just kind of got to make the soul read and say, well, you better have it.
No reactions on my end.
Test, we are putting DM in here. Florin giving up that blood on the hands of their own, deciding they're likely not going to get to that point. The follow-up, a very, very beautiful copy of Command and
Gorgeous
Conquer.
card.
Once again, threatening that Arsenal after previously earning blocks. This is super heads up. If the Armada doesn't think they're getting bags of that blood on their hands, making an opponent respect those copper tokens when they don't matter might give you the way to smash through a Command and Conquer or earn more cards to stop it from hitting. That's what we see here. 2 more cards from hand gone from Florin to keep that Arsenal safe.
This is potentially a big tempo stealing turn for DM Armada, because I think if Florin was not anticipating being left on these 2 cards, the card in his hand and the card in his arsenal, it could be a situation where he actually lacks a go again enabler, and that opens up so much tempo for DM.
Sorry, Saber for 2.
We are starting with the expected 2 damage Centauri Saber off a blue Iron Song response. Very popular card in Florin's list. This leaves that information kind of hidden for as long as possible. Was that card in our arsenal? We were protecting a Blade Runner. We know there's a good chance a Go Again Enabler is what we were looking to keep last turn. It would make some amount of sense. Is it perhaps a card that doesn't grant Go Again? And by not blocking here, we get to keep our entire grip. There's an awful lot to process here for both players.
Absolutely. I think it really comes down to how much DM thinks he can capitalize on the potential tempo if this is actually just a 1-swing turn from Florin. If this hand is not going to do it, then you know what? Save the life points. There's no reason to risk putting yourself in a blowout position to keep a hand that's a bit suboptimal. But if this hand is the nuts, then we could be seeing a no-block situation here. And once again, making Florin have it.
Such a testament to the magic of Flesh and Blood. It's Glint the Quicksilver in the arsenal. It was that Go Again enabler, but one of the less punishing ones, rewarding us for not blocking that first swing here. Go Again coming in, but no extra card drawn.
Massively so. That reprise effect would have been back-breaking for DM at this stage of the game. This kind of card advantage is the crux of the mirror, and I think while DM has pushed incredible tempo with the likes of Command and Conquer, and even achieved a little bit of card advantage in that way, I mean, Florin's lines of just playing the clean swing, 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 swing has really pushed him ahead in the long term in this game.
Lose the counter and
A testament to Kassai as a hero and this mirror match as well. Both players drawing very similar cards, and yet find themselves with very different ways of navigating those play patterns, ebbing and flowing, responding to the opponent's actions. And that's been incredible to see. Really cool one here from DM Armada. Not a auto include by any stretch. Iron Song Determination, a very powerful yellow card from way back when, granting our weapon swings dominate. That's quite the threatening endgame all by itself.
What's really fascinating about a card like Iron Song Determination is that it targets an individual weapon. So in this case, I imagine it might target the Centauri Saber, but it puts you in this really interesting position of what exactly are you kind of gunning for with that Dominant Enabler? And we see DM came prepared for a long game indeed, courtesy of the OG fabled Heart of Fyendal.
Oh, Heart of Fyendal. Very interesting inclusion in his Kassai list that does pop up in the list, expecting to grind a little further. It is 2 coming in this case, being given Go Again by run through. So we are choosing to eat a little bit of damage in this case, earn a gold token from Kassai, and maybe respect that second sword swing instead. I get a feeling we might be disrespecting this turn entirely, though.
Let's see. I mean, at 5 life, Florin can posit. He can just posture an absolutely insane hand. And if he does so, it puts him in a really, really fantastic position where DM Armada is forced to have the reactions to deal with it, or he will just lose all tempo on the spot trying to overblock.
And Dynamo continuing to do that kind of incidental heavy lifting, pick up a point of block here and there. Florin falling to 15 in this case. Really big life total deficit at this point. Full hand of cards for Florin, and we're pitching that blood on our hands to crack our gold to start. Been incredible to watch Florin use that bank of gold to keep making these sword swings free and prioritize keeping all those buff effects in their hand turn after turn.
Well, if there's one thing I love in Flesh and Blood, it's drawing cards. And if Kassai is incentivizing me to do so, then I'm all in, baby.
Certainly can't argue with a good bit of card draw in your TCGs. It's just a most fun thing to do, of course.
Absolutely.
Florin here taking the time to reevaluate based on that card draw. Maybe their decision tree has changed and the best way of progressing their turn is different than it was moments ago. It's a really important lesson to take away from these players of this pedigree. Reevaluate your situation. Flesh and Blood is a game of constantly changing information, with opponents making different choices after every game action is resolved. As you learn something new, take a brief moment to reconsider how it might affect your turn. And I love seeing it on this this kind of event where nothing matters whatsoever.
I think that absolutely. I mean, it's for the love of the game. You should play at your best, even for the love of the game. That's where we're at.
It's great to see these kind of competitive level players who can dial this on. You can just tell it's something they're very passionate about and the part of Flesh and Blood they enjoy. It's not just a show for the higher events or when it's all important. It's just getting the best out of the game that everybody's here to enjoy. And it's definitely something worth celebrating, in my opinion.
Absolutely. The mission statement of playing great games, a very important one.
I'll pitch my slice and dice
So,
as well.
choosing to try and soak up this first sword swing with our remaining armor. Grains of Blood Spill mostly done its work at this point. Our life total a little bit more important as we go.
Holy moly!
That's a large amount of blades.
I was
a runner
just about
and
to
several
say
flurries.
that it's been a while since Florin's seen a power card. So he's overdue for one eventually, and wouldn't you know, they turn up in threes apparently.
Well, down to 1 point of life we go as the M Armada, this Centauri Saber swing with a bonus, 7 points of power. Nothing major.
Yeah,
just
casual weapon for 9, no big deal, don't worry about it.
On hit death, my favorite type of on hit in Flesh and Blood. Yeah, I was wondering where those blade flurries were too, and it turns out they were stuck together right next to their runner.
What I was worried about in DM's case was the ticking clock of the nourishing emptinesses, which must be around the corner, but it's looking like that's a block for 9, but with the attack actions blocking the Centauri Saber, it gets pumped up to 10. DM Armada is forced to give the entirety of his hand in order to block this.
My God, the punishment. A concession in this case.
When you know you're spent, and that is absolutely
no way of taking tempo back.
And there's the nourishing that was there to seal the deal right at the end.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, what a game.
Goes to show you, doesn't it? We talk all game about how those Centauri Sabers are mostly blank as things continue, and yet at the very dying moment, the fact it is a Centauri Saber coming in is what is make or break in winning Florin that game. Incredibly navigated by both players.
Indeed. What a fantastic display of the matchup, and a really tempo-oriented, and in my opinion, quite a novel take on the matchup. I'm so used to thinking of this as a grind fest in which you have to play more than 60 cards in order just to have a shot in the game, but these guys just threw them at each other. I mean, look at the size of Florin's deck towards the end of the game.
Yeah, we were definitely running out of gas towards the end there. Well navigated, well put together by both players, and a spectacle to watch, all in all. Really enjoyed it. Congratulations to Florin, and hopefully they continue to charge valiantly towards absolutely nothing, and commiserations to DM Armada. Incredible run, well navigated, and a great game to watch.
Indeed. There's nothing like having performance like this at the absolute apex of Flesh and Blood play that happens to mean absolutely nothing.
You love to see it. So, with that being said, that was an incredible game. If you want to find more of Shamir, where can they find you, Shamir?
You can find me on Twitter/X. I'm at Shamir Sami, where I am casting like this, as you see, but I also coach Flesh and Blood and work with my professional team, Team Sigil, to bring you some of the best Flesh and Blood gameplay out there.
They're really good. I recommend talking to them. If you want a little bit more of me, you can find me over on Howling Minds on Twitter or over on TCG Player for everything Flesh and Blood. I write several articles every month. And I also do a little bit of commentary on the side when they let me out of the cellar, where I'm carefully chained for the future.
He's really good too.
Okay.
Can't recommend.
It means the world. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and make sure you come back in, like and subscribe on this channel for more things that mean absolutely nothing. But until next time, I've been Howling Minds. That has been Shamir Sami, and you have been amazing. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again very, very soon.
See you, folks.